Everyone, welcome to another Animation Friday. I apologize I had to delay this video up until today. I really wasn't feeling well yesterday on Monday and over the weekend and leading up to it I was pretty busy, but I should be caught up by the end of today. So without further ado, let me address what I wanted to talk about for this particular Animation Friday, and that has to do with branding. Because branding, I think, is very important when you look at in particular animation, whether it be through television or through film, because it's so uniquely different from live action. Because with live action, there's not a huge emphasis on really branding anything. I mean, you can brand maybe the film, but you can't really necessarily brand the whole studio or the whole identity of um, what the studio makes because it's so broad and extensive. Um, and it's really not limited to a specific demographic. But with animation, this is a completely different story. Because with animation, the branding is sort of the identity behind all of the works that are sort of uh, created, at least over the years. Uh, and again, I think this branding initially sort of started with Disney and Looney Tunes, because you did have the Disney brand that was the innocent, wholesome, humble feel that is what really allowed Disney to stand out as a animation studio company. And then you had Looney Tunes, which were zany, bizarre, uh, out there, um, pushing the envelope as far as really more of the, I guess, more violent aspect of cartoons, more so than Disney, which is more safe. So you really had this real identity formation. And this, I think, primarily did start within around the 40s and 50s. Obviously, they started much earlier, but it wasn't until they kind of reached that kind of eras really when they seemed kind of really fully developed. And nowadays, you obviously see an identity with Pixar, and you also see sort of an identity with DreamWorks too, and how they try to kind of separate themselves from Disney, and how Disney tries to uh, keep its brand the way it is. And you might be saying, well, where does really the branding kind of come from? Well, a lot of it can be attributed to the characters that they create. Um, the interesting thing is live action. I believe, at least from my understanding, is that when you're looking at live action, you're looking more at a story. You're looking more at a journey and characters going from point A to point B, and you sort of remember the actors. You kind of don't really remember too much of the characters as much as the actors that play them. And more so, you remember the actors for playing the character well, um, or creating or going inside the character really well. But with animation, the characters are pretty much everything because the characters define your brand. So, for example, with Disney, their branding and the way they present things is largely through the way in which the characters are constructed. In other words, they're very smooth lined. They get the big eyes. They have, just this kind of general innocence about them, uh, more so than other characters that you see in other studio brands, or companies, really. Uh, but when you really look at the way in which Disney creates its characters, they usually follow sort of a more standard kind of look. It's designed to kind of be colorful, and there's a beauty to it as well. There's a huge emphasis on that primarily within their brand, because they were all about starting off with fairy tales, starting off with stories that were initially written down and passed on years and years ago, and they sort of revive and bring that culture and that sort of beauty and artistry into the animation itself. So it's really a huge part of their identity and where they get their stories and where they get their whole appeal from. Um, with DreamWorks, on the other hand, they are obviously a lot more zany and goofy. They're more like the Looney Tunes of our time. They're more edgy. They try to be more based upon, kind of more pop culture, and not necessarily about trying to kind of have this very kind of traditional approach, which is primarily what Disney focuses on. And I think what you could say as far as Pixar is concerned and how they sort of differentiated themselves from Disney's is that they made their stories a little bit more on the realistic side, but then also bringing in some emotional uh, aspects to them that are sort of part of Disney, and I think were largely inspired because of Disney. So you could argue whether or not Pixar's where Pixar's branding kind of falls under. But I think a lot of it came through Disney and through the inspiration from that company to transfer it over and create their own kind of unique style, and also creating a differentiating brand, which I think you could argue whether or not exactly how they define it, but I would say that they are more so in the middle and between DreamWorks and Disney, and at the same time they bring in a lot of elements that are very more, I think, similar to Disney, but then at the same time they try to bring in these kinds of more realistic kinds of issues and struggles that are more uh, designed to be, I guess, linked to at least more live action kinds of stories and understandings of the ways in which we, I guess, look at the world. I would say it's not purely fantasy oriented. It tries to kind of base itself on a little bit of realism, more so. And that's something that, again, is what really distinguishes all of these different companies. And really, the characters and their personalities are what really showcase who the company is and what they sort of stand for, and what they believe in, and what's their whole message that they're trying to get across to the world, and all that is really designed to be incorporated into the branding. And I think it's, again, some people are going to argue whether or not the branding and all of that is a good thing or a bad thing. I don't think it's necessarily trying to be bad, and I think it's trying to, again, bring out the positivity of the artistry, and again, kind of express a personality, express who they are. And I think a lot of that really does come through, not just with entertainment, but with just companies in general. There's usually some kind of identity, there's some kind of purpose behind their whole kind of, at least, purpose in existing. And I think the easiest way to really distinguish this with animation is to really look at the characters and to look at the way in which they're constructed and how their personalities are like. And really, that's where you can get an understanding of what their whole idea of children's entertainment is. And again, I think it's good that there's all of these different kinds of variations. It's nice that there's a little bit more of a zaniness uh, with animation, and then there's also a little bit more of a reserved and traditional kind of style. I like that there is there's a lot of extensive variety within this particular medium, and I really do enjoy it overall. But again, you sort of even to have a certain kind of mascot kind of behind the uh, animation studio. Like for example, DreamWorks, obviously Shrek is their main big thing that really did propel them to stardom, regardless of whether or not you like those films. And Mickey Mouse obviously is a staple for Disney. So it's clear that, again, this identity is largely attributed to a character and what the character sort of symbolizes. And it's interesting, and I think definitely one that is uh, something that, or at least is something that's very important and significant. I would definitely put it up there as being uh, a huge part of the success of a particular animation studio, um, and is really the sort of brains behind the whole operation and maintaining a certain appearance or a certain image, because pictures are worth 1,000 words. And again, what's great about animation is you can convey within a character so many different understandings, but then you can kind of create a whole kind of consensus onto what's being kind of represented. And in doing so, you have your branding. But I think that's really all I can say about this topic. I mean, it's pretty interesting, and I think it's something that's really important when you're really looking at a lot of these different uh, ways in which animation is sort of constructed and how it's presented. Um, you know, it's really a brand. It's an identity, um, and it's good to kind of see it showcased. And I think the artistry and the creativity is really something that's, I think, important for people to have. And I think it's great, and I think these brands will obviously be maintained for quite some time. I don't know where they will go within the future, but I think that's really ultimately all I can say about them. But if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.